People who watch security cameras for a living, what creepy things have you tried to forget? Years ago I worked overnight at a homeless shelter for men. A good portion of the regular guys that stayed there had mental health and/or drug problems. There were a lot of fights and the occasional stabbing, but for the most part everyone was relatively behaved and most were good people at heart. I received a lot of threats, but one never acted on them. One night when I arrived for my shift I noticed there was a much larger police presence than usual. I walked into our office and the officer in charge started asking me if I had noticed a guy, Richard, behaving unusually at all lately. I had not saw anything out of the ordinary and I told them such. I looked at the dorm list and noted that he was marked as no longer staying at the shelter. He was a long-term resident, so I thought this was odd. The police left without telling me anything except the fact they needed security footage from 2 specific cameras from the night before. I did not work the night before and the guy I normally work with pulled a no-show. We were the only 2 people besides the manager, who was on a holiday, that were trained on how to burn footage to a DVD. I spent the rest of my shift in shock. When I found the footage they were looking for I felt physically ill. Richard had gone out onto the 2nd floor smoking deck, finished a cigarette, got up on the railing, and dove head first onto the cement below. The first camera on the 2nd floor showed him jump, but the 2nd camera on the 1st floor was much more gruesome. He landed head first and rolled over in a way that he was staring right into the camera as he lay there dying. I quickly put the footage on DVD and went to throw up. I was given the next day off. No counseling. No nothing. I will never forget that one. He was a pretty good dude as far as I knew him. Some mental issues, but no one knew he was suicidal or why he did it. So many of these will give me nightmares, so I'll throw one in the mix that I never want to forget. A year back I was working at a hostel and we have security cameras throughout the building. Watching the footage from the camera in the kitchen. It is about 2 a.m. and a very drunk guest walks in, grabs some snacks, and accidentally drops an empty bottle on the ground. He then proceeds to kick it up into the air, then kick it again in air, where it flies across the entire length of the room perfectly into the recycling bin. In his drunken state he threw up his hands, ran around in a circle clearly in shock at how amazing he is. Then after looking around he noticed there was no one there to see it. After that he looked visibly depressed and stumbled back out of the kitchen. Working in a rehearsal studio for bands we had camera at the front desk that pointed down the hall with the entrances to all the rooms. One day I'm sitting there minding my own business and noticed there was a girl sitting in the hallway outside one of the studios. She had come in with the band that was practicing and I just assumed she didn't feel like sitting in the loud space with the band. So I got up and went to tell her she was welcome to sit in the lobby where there was a couch and TV. I got around the corner and she wasn't there. I went back the desk and there she was, sitting in the hall waiting outside the room. So I went back out to find her not there again. I assumed she had gone into the room, so I went and knocked and they informed me that the girl had left a while before, just after they had gotten started practicing. So I went back and there she was, still on the camera. It was only then that I realized I had accidentally bumped the freeze frame button for the monitor. Not necessarily creepy, but I work on security for a popular UK supermarket and came into work one day to find a note asking me to burn an incident off the cameras onto disk. It was something from the car park the previous night, so I figured we'd had a shoplifter in or an accident in the car park, but no, it wasn't anything as pleasant as that. We'd had a situation where a couple, older white gentleman and youngish Asian female, had been in store and the night security guy just thought they were acting a bit funny, so he follows them round store on CCTV in store to see if anything went on. Nothing really happens during this time, though the guy seems to become more and more aggravated. They go outside having purchased their shopping to pack it into the car boot, when a clear argument occurs between them. He suddenly turns around, kicks the empty trolley across the car park and then smacks her full force in the face out of seemingly nowhere. She recoils in pain. A bit more shouting takes place, but she seems to dutifully take her seat in the passenger seat despite what just took place. During the process of burning this to disk for the police, since our security guy had called it in as an assault, I had to rewatch the moment where he hits her over and over again, but watch helplessly as she seems to calmly get into the car of the man who just assaulted her. Long story short, she was a mail-order bride who was trafficked here, and as well as assault he got done for people trafficking, so a pretty wholesome ending to an otherwise awful story. When I worked as a security officer, it was my first week on the job. I watched my boss and another officer try to talk a guy off of the top of our parking structure. Didn't work. Watched him jump off and land next to an employee who was coming in for her shift. Guy hit the ground so hard it exploded the belt right off of his pants. I will never forget watching that. Was watching CCTV footage of a parking deck, and on the 9th level there's this guy sitting in the middle of the deck, banging his head on one of the pillars. All of a sudden the guy just stops, and runs to the edge. Without stopping or jumping, he flings himself over the edge. I immediately called dispatch and told them what had happened. Few days later I was offered counseling for those events. Worked as a harbor master a while ago. Had to check the marina's cameras after a boat was abandoned at our docks. I was looking for the owner. I looked on the tape from the boat's first night in the marina. The man who had sailed the boat in was standing on the end of his boat for 2 hours, barely moving. Then at 1:30 a.m. he just walked off the back and dropped into the water. He never came back up. Never found his body. Freaky. I work in a retail store, and for a while I worked security here. Watching the security cameras wasn't technically my job, but we were consistently short-handed in that department and the manager was grooming me for promotion, so I got to fill in and watch the cameras occasionally. One day when we were reviewing footage from overnights, we saw this teenager calmly set down his shopping basket, take off his hat and glasses, and just charge at a wall. Hit it head on. He did this 2 more times. When he was done, his face was a bloody mess, and he put his hat and glasses back on and just left. Weirded me right the hell out. I used to work IT at a university, and last Easter we had a break-in. We found the footage of the guy going in at 2 p.m., leaving at around 3, and not really taking anything. Fast forward to 7 p.m. and the guy comes back in and is walking around the auditorium till 6 a.m. the next morning. In that time he proceeded to strip into his underwear, steal and wear a mask the Japanese exchange students made for the teacher, and smoke a shit ton. He managed to steal 6 full bags of random items. We've dubbed him as the Jack-Off Bandit. Not security cameras per se, but I had a SOAP-type job monitoring corporate internet usage. We had an image inspector watching people's web traffic, and it would throw up questionable images that someone on the network downloaded onto the big SOAP screen. Being a medical-related company, there were a lot of breast cancer-type traffic that would throw off the porn detectors, which is why we watched in real-ish time. One time I was sitting at the desk overnight, nobody should have been working, and suddenly the SOAP screen turned into a wall of graphic child porn. Some genius took his laptop home, VPN'd into work, and started browsing so as to avoid being caught by his ISP. He's in prison now. This incident is a large part of why I no longer do that kind of work, or corporate forensics. They make it sound like it's all catching hackers and espionage, but in reality, it's mostly looking at other people's porn. Wasn't a security officer, but I worked at a 24/7 gas station for a while. One night my coworker accidentally killed himself while at work, and I made the mistake of watching the footage. He went to the back of the store with a bag of drugs, probably cocaine, snorted it and started acting funny for about 10 minutes. He then sits in the back office and gets fidgety/thrashing around until finally he just goes limp in the chair. He had died of a heart attack and sat there for 5 hours before anybody came in, thought the absence of an employee was strange, and called the cops. It was really weird seeing people come in and act all pissy for the lack of service. They'd just leave thinking someone was lazy. But nah. Dude was dead. I was working at pub in Sydney and watching the CCTV when I saw a guy continually cross and uncross his legs while playing a poker/slot machine. After a few minutes he walked to a corner of the room, took a shit and proceeded to go back to playing his machine. Talk about being addicted. Edit. Holy shit, this blew up. To answer some of your questions, this kind of thing is not rare. Mostly it's people pissing themselves. These machines are evil and designed to get people addicted, and that results in some people not being able to pull themselves away, even to use a bathroom. Finally, thank God I'm a manager, but telling someone it was their job sucked. Not a CCTV operator, but I was chummy with the security guards I used to work with. It was in a large 3-story retail building in a city center and we had all sorts of folks coming in and out. We had a phantom wanker and phantom shitter who would leave their bodily fluids in random places. They were known as Jack the Shitter and Wanksy, and it turned out to be the same guy. He was clever and knew where all the security camera were. He'd cased the joint. The only reason he got busted was because they were moved. By far the funniest thing I saw was a guy being chased into the building on the 2nd floor by the police. He ran around the shop for about 5 minutes while being chased by police and our security guards. It was great watching it on different screens as he moved through the building. Anyway, he got to ground floor and underestimated the drop onto the escalator and broke his leg, and the escalator him brought back up to the feet of the security guards who were chasing him. It was brilliant. Not for a living, but we had security cameras installed on the property whilst we were living in South Africa. We had a monitor set up next to the bed so we could see what was happening on the 4 cameras without having to get up out of bed. One night we heard something, so we turn on the monitor and see nothing unusual. I'm ready to go back to sleep, but my partner thinks something is off about one of the cameras. "Does this camera look like it's pointing in a different direction slightly?" she asks. "No. Same as always, and it's back to bed for me." She isn't convinced, so she starts watching the recordings. True enough, footage of some dude prowling around on the property, and the camera catches him adjusting it. The terrifying bit? The way his face looked beneath the balaclava. Murder mask is what my so called it. Pretty creepy shit. My friend used to run security for a parking garage, and he saw everything from drug deals to what he could only assume was prostitution going on, but the one thing he will never forget was the guy that got stabbed. He was walking down the parking garage looking drunk, which is why he was looking at him. From his explanation, he stops and starts yelling and flinging his arms around, and just outside of that camera's range was another guy in a hoodie and basketball shorts with the same type of body language. He runs to grab the only other person on staff to see if he should call security or the cops. When he gets back after what he says was 4 or 5 minutes, they are now in each other's face, and as the other guy calls security, he sees the hoodie guy stab the other dude in the stomach/abdomen multiple times before making a run for it. The next 5 minutes were traumatizing to just hear. Apparently the guy that got stabbed got up and was crawling towards the stairs and was just leaving this giant trail of blood behind him. If anyone has worked in this before, can you answer me one question? As someone watching the footage, are you allowed to leave your post and intervene? My friend said no, but how could one just sit there and not do anything? The guy that got stabbed died, and they were never told about whether the other dude was caught. Spent a few years working front desk for various shifts at a few hotels, moved a lot during this time, so I got a pretty big sampling of people from here and there. But the one thing I will never forget was right here in my home state of KY, in broad daylight. A woman who did not have a room with us walked into the pool area from the large, sliding glass window, speaking on her cell phone with a bag hanging from that hand, and a toddler walking with her on the other hand. She let go of the toddler, then proceeded to get completely nude and continue her conversation standing in the pool area, not the pool itself, just the pool area.